it's not the same Green Knight that I've already done the story for in the King Arthur Legends that I've been working on. So I'm going to read it, and we will find out if I am correct in this assumption or not. So here we go. Such beautiful pictures. Once upon a time, there were a king and a queen, and they had but one little daughter. And when she was very young, her dear mother became sick unto death. When the queen knew that she had only a short time to live, she called the king and said, "My dear lord and husband, in order that I may die in peace, you must promise me one thing, and that is, that you will never refuse our child anything that she may ask of you, if it be possible to grant her wish." That the king promised her, and she died soon afterward. The king's heart was nearly broken, for he loved his wife devotedly, and his little daughter alone could comfort him. The princess grew up, and the fulfillment of the promise was indeed easy for the king. He never refused her request. That spoiled her a little, but otherwise she was a dear, good child, who only needed a mother to understand and love her. For the lack of this, she was often moody and melancholy. The princess did not care for games and amusements like other children, but instead she liked to wander alone in the gardens and the woods, and above all, she loved flowers and birds and animals, and she was also fond of reading poetry and stories. Not far from the palace there lived the widow of a count who had a daughter a little older than the princess. The young countess, however, was not a good girl, but was vain, selfish, and hard-hearted. On the other hand, she was clever like her mother, and could dissimulate when she thought it would serve her ends. The countess cleverly devised ways so that her daughter was often thrown together with the princess, and both mother and daughter spared no pains to please her. They did everything in their power to give her pleasure and cheer her, and soon she always had to have either one or the other by her side. Now that was just what the countess wanted, and had been working for, so that when she saw that she had brought matters to that point, she made her daughter tell the princess, amid tears, that they must now separate because she and her mother had to go far away into another country. Then the little princess ran at once to the countess and told her that she must not leave with her daughter, for she could not live without her, and would grieve to death if she left her. Then the countess pretended to be deeply moved, and told the princess that there was only one way that she could be persuaded to stay in the country, and that was for the king to marry her. Then both mother and daughter could always stay with her, and they painted in glowing colors the joys that would be hers if that should come to pass. Then the princess went to her father, the king, and begged and implored him to marry the countess, for otherwise she would go away, and his poor little daughter would lose her only friend and grieve to death. "You would certainly repent of it if I were to do it," said the king, "and I should also, for I have no desire whatever to marry, and I have no confidence in the deceitful countess and her deceitful daughter." But the princess did not cease crying and imploring him until he promised to grant her wish. Then the king asked the countess to marry him, and she at once consented. Soon after that the wedding ceremony took place, and the countess became queen, and was now the stepmother of the young princess. But after the marriage all was changed. The queen did nothing but tease and torment her stepdaughter, while nothing was too good for her own child. Her daughter did not pay any attention to the poor princess, but did everything she could to make her life miserable. The king, who could see all this, took it very much to heart, for he loved his daughter deeply, so he said to her on one occasion, "Alas, my was accustomed to grant her every wish, so he only said he would not forget to greet the knight as soon as he met him. Then he bade his daughter a tender farewell, and started on his journey to the meeting of the kings. There he found many princes, young nobles, and knights, but among them there was no one called the Green Knight, so the king could not deliver his daughter's message. At last he started on his homeward journey, and had to cross high mountains and wide rivers, and to go through dense forests. And as the king one day was passing through one of those great woods with his train, they came upon a large open space where thousands of boars were feeding. These were not wild but tame, and were guarded by a swineherd in the garb of a huntsman, who sat surrounded by his dogs on a little knoll, and had a pipe to whose notes all animals listened and were obedient. The king wondered at this herd of two boars, and had one of his retainers ask the swineherd to whom they belonged. He answered that they belonged to the Green Knight. Then the king remembered what his daughter had asked him, and he himself rode up to the man and asked whether the Green Knight lived in the neighborhood. No, he replied, he lives far from here towards the east. If you ride in that direction, you will meet other herdsmen who will show you the way to his castle. Then the king and his men rode eastward for 3 days through a great forest, until they came again to a large plain surrounded by great forest, on which immense herds of elks and wild oxen were grazing. These also were guarded by herdsmen in hunter's dress, accompanied by his dogs, and the king rode to the man who told him that all these herds belonged to the Green Knight, who lived further eastward. And again after 3 days the king came to a great clearing, where he saw great herds of stags and does, and the herdsman, in answer to his question, said that the Green Knight's castle was but a day's journey distant. Then the king rode for a day on green paths, through green woods, until he came to a great castle, which was also green, for it was entirely covered by vines and climbing plants. When they rode up to the castle, a large number of men, dressed in green like hunters, appeared and escorted them into the castle, and announced that the king of such and such kingdom had arrived, and desired to greet their master. Then the lord of the castle came himself, a tall, handsome young man, also clad in green, and bade his guests welcome and entertained them in a lordly manner. Then said the king, you live far away, and you have so great a domain that I had to go much out of my way to fulfill my daughter's wish. When I rode forth to attend the gathering of the kings, she asked me to greet the Green Knight for her, and to tell him how she longed for him, and that he alone could free her from her torment. Excuse me. This is a very strange commission that I have undertaken, but my daughter knows what is right and proper, and moreover I promised her mother on her deathbed that I would never refuse our only child a wish, so I have come here to deliver the message and keep my promise. Then the Green Knight said to the king, your daughter was sad, and was certainly not thinking of me when she gave you her message, for she can never have heard of me. She is probably thinking of the churchyard with its many green mounds, where alone she hoped to find rest. But perhaps I can give her something to alleviate her sorrow. Take this little book, and tell the princess when she is sad and heavy-hearted to open her east window, and to read in the book. It will gladden her heart. Then the knight gave the king a little green book, but he could not read it, because he did not know the letters with which the words were written. He took it, however, and thanked the Green Knight for his kind and hospitable reception. He was very sorry. He assured the knight that he had disturbed him, as the princess had not meant him at all. They had to remain overnight in the castle, and the knight would gladly have kept them longer, but the king insisted that he must leave the next day. So the following morning he said goodbye to his host, and rode back the way he had come until he came to the clearing where the boars were, and from there he went straight home. The first thing the king did was to go to the island and take the little green book to his daughter. She was astonished when her father told her about the Green Knight, and gave her his greetings and the book, for she had not thought of a human being, nor had she the faintest idea that a Green Knight existed. But that very evening, when their father was gone, the princess opened her east window, and began to read her green book, although it was not written in her mother tongue. The book contained many poems, and its language was beautiful. One of the first things that she read began as follows. princess, however, could not sleep the whole night, and felt miserable all the next day. Nevertheless, towards evening, she rose in order to get a little fresh air, so she seated herself at the open east window, opened the book, and read as usual. The wind is risen on the sea, and bloweth over field and lea, and while on earth broodeth silent night, who to the night her troth will plight? And the wind soughed through the trees, and leaves rustled, and all slept, except the princess. But the night came not, and so the days passed, and she waited and watched, and read in her little green book, and sang, but no green night came. Then her red cheeks again became pale, and her happy heart sad and heavy, and she began to waste away, to the sorrow of her father, but to the secret joy of her stepmother. One day the princess walked feebly alone through the castle garden on that island, and seated herself on a bench under a high tree. And there she remained a long time, plunged in sad and gloomy thoughts. While she was there, two ravens came and perched on a branch over her head, and began to talk together. "It is pitiful," said one, "to see our dear princess grieving to death for her beloved." "Yes," said the other one, "especially as she is the only one who can cure him of the wound inflicted on him by the poisoned sisters of the queen." "How so?" asked the first raven. "Like cures like," replied the other one. "Over yonder in the courtyard of her king, west of the stables, there lies in a hole under a stone an adder with her 9 young. If the princess could get these and cook them, and give 3 young adders every day to the sick knight, he would recover. Otherwise there is no help for him." As soon as night came, the princess slipped out of the castle, went down to the shore, where she found a boat, and rowed over to the palace. She went straight to the stone in the courtyard, and rolled it away, heavy as it was, and there she found the 9 young adders. These she tied up in her apron, and went forth on the way that she knew her father had taken when he returned from the gathering of the knights. So she traveled on foot for weeks and months, over high mountains and through dense forests, until she came at last upon the same swineherd that her father had met. He pointed out to her the way through the woods to the second herdsman, who in turn showed her the path to the third man. At last she reached the green castle where the knight lived, and lay sick with the poison and a fever, so ill that he recognized nobody, but only rolled and tossed in anguish and pain. Physicians had been called from the ends of the earth, but no one could procure for him the slightest relief. The princess went into the kitchen, and asked whether they could not give her some employment. She would wash the dishes, or do anything he asked her to, if only they would allow her to stay. The cook consented, and because she was so neat and quick and willing at every kind of work, he soon found her a valuable helper, and let her have her own way in many things. So one day she said to him, "Today you must let me prepare the soup for our sick master. I know very well how it ought to be cooked, but I want to be allowed to cook it alone, and no one may look into the pot." The cook was willing, and so she cooked 3 of the young adders in the soup, which was carried up to the Green Knight. And when he had eaten the soup, the fever went down so much that he could recognize those about him and speak intelligently. Then he called the cook, and asked him whether he had cooked the soup that had done him so much good. The cook answered that he had done so, as no one else was allowed to prepare the food for his master. Then the Green Knight bade him make more of the same kind of soup on the morrow. Now it was the cook's turn to go to the princess and beg her to prepare the soup for the night. And as before, she put 3 young adders in it. This time, after partaking of it, he felt so well that he could get up out of bed. At this all the doctors were amazed, and could not understand how it happened. But of course they said that the medicines they had been giving him were beginning to have an effect. On the 3rd day, the kitchen maid again had to prepare the soup, and she cooked in it the last 3 young adders. And as soon as the knight had eaten it, he felt perfectly well. Then he jumped up and wanted to go down to the kitchen himself to thank the cook, for after all, he was certainly the best physician. Now it happened that when he entered the kitchen, there was no one there except a maid who was wiping dishes. But even as he looked, he recognized her, and it suddenly dawned upon him what she had done for him. He folded king's capital is the next one, and we will begin that now. There were once upon a time a man and his wife, and they had one son. They had no money, and sometimes they did not even have bread. When they thought that the boy was old enough to earn his own living, they gave him a crust of bread and told him to go out into the world to seek his fortune. The boy went straight to the king's palace and asked whether they would receive him into service. He would do anything they asked him if it were only honest work, and he asked no other wages than his board and lodging. The only place they could find for him was that of errand boy. This suited him very well, for he was quick and nimble on his feet, although not strong enough to do the heavy work of the older serving men. He soon became accustomed to the duties in his new position, and gave satisfaction in everything that he undertook. Once he was entrusted with a very important mission. The king was a widower and wanted to marry a rich and beautiful queen with whom he was much in love. As it was very hard to secure admission to her presence, the king commissioned the youth to speak to the queen in his behalf, and so successful was he that he brought back the queen's consent to the marriage, which took place soon afterward. From that time on, the errand boy stood high in the king's favor, and received fine clothes and good wages. This excited the anger and jealousy of the court steward, who was afraid that the errand boy might supplant him, so he sought to devise some plan by which to get the youth out of the way. With that object in view, he one day related to the king that the errand boy had been boasting that he could carry out any command that might be given him, and that even if the king were to send him to hell in order to collect the interest on his capital, which had long been due, but which he had never been able to collect, why, he was man enough to do even that. Now, the boy had never said that, nor anything like it, and he told the king so when he was commanded to appear before him. But all his protestations were of no avail. The king simply told him that he must carry out this command, namely, to collect the interest, and as he had a long journey before him, he was to be allowed to ride, and received as his steed a goat. The errand boy took a bag of provisions, seated himself on the goat, and rode out into the world, letting the animal choose the way. The goat took him into a great forest, and when he had gone some distance, a raven spoke to him and asked him where he was going. "I must go to hell in order to get the interest for my king," replied the youth. "That is a long journey, and a dangerous one," said the raven, "and if you will follow my advice, dig down to the root of this tree on which I am sitting, and there you will find a sword, and everything that you strike with it will break into pieces. Remember also one thing more, and that is, never leave the highways." The errand boy dug down to the roots of the tree, and there he found a sword, so he thanked the raven for his good counsel, and went straight along the highway. After a time, he met an old woman riding on a goat. This was the devil's grandmother. She rode along beside him, and asked him whether he would not exchange his steed for hers. He said that he would not, because he wanted to keep the one that his master had given him. Then she tried to entice him from the straight road on which he was traveling, saying that she knew many good side roads that would take him much more quickly to his destination. But he steadfastly refused to be persuaded, and at last the old woman left him. Some time after that he came to a hill on which 12 maidens were standing and weeping. The youth asked them why they were so sad. "Alas," they said, "we have good reason to weep and lament, for there dwells a terrible monster in our land who is going to devour us at his Christmas banquet." One of the maidens had a shepherd's pipe in her hand, which the youth took away from her, and asked whom it belonged. They all cried out together that he must not blow it, for otherwise the monster would come at once. Nevertheless, the errand boy put the pipe to his lips and blew hard, so that its notes sounded they spoke to the dragon and bore greetings from his brother in the woods, and it, knowing that he meant the raven, allowed him to pass unharmed through the gates of hell. When he entered, the devil started up and asked him gruffly what he wanted. The errand boy greeted him from the king, and said he had come to get the interest that the devil owed him, and had not paid for a long time. At first the devil pretended not to know anything about the matter, until his grandmother came and whispered in his ear that he must be careful, for this fellow was dangerous, as he had killed his 3 sons, the many-headed monsters. Then he saw that there was nothing for him to do except to comply with the youth's request. Then the devil immediately became very polite, and gave the errand boy all the interest money in a large bag. As he was passing through the gate, the dragon called to him, told him to pull off its skin. This he did after some difficulty, and behold, there stood before him a most beautiful princess. He put her up behind him, and the goat trotted off tolerably quickly in spite of his heavy load. When they had gone a short distance, the princess told him to look back. He did so, and saw that the devil and his grandmother, riding on a goat, were pursuing them as fast as they could. Then the princess turned and spat in the road, and suddenly there was a great lake of fire that the devil could not cross. Scratch that part about fire. I added that in. Apparently my Christian background just totally threw itself in there for no reason. I'll reread. Then the princess turned and spat on the road, and suddenly there was a great lake that the devil could not cross. Then he and his grandmother lay down and quickly drank up all the water. In the meantime, the errand boy and the princess had gained a great deal on them. Again they looked around and saw the devil coming after them at a great pace. Then the princess threw down a glass bead, which immediately became an immense mountain of glass. Now the devil had to return home in order to rough-shoe his goat so that it could cross the mountain. That, however, took a long time, and the fugitives gained a great deal upon their pursuers. When the princess looked around again for the 3rd time, the devil and his grandmother were close on their heels. Then the princess called out, "Let it be bright before us and dark behind." And at once inky darkness and thick fog fell behind them, whereas bright day lay before them. Now they rode along the highway until they came to the wood, and reached the place where the raven had sat, and given the youth the good advice and the sword. Sure enough, there sat the raven still, and he bade them welcome. Then the raven said to the young man, "Cut off my head, and put it on again wrong side foremost." And when he had done as he was commanded, there stood, in the place of the raven, a handsome young prince, who was the brother of the princess, who had been transformed by magic into a dragon. Soon afterwards they all 3 arrived safe and sound at the king's palace, but as it was night, and he did not want to cause any disturbance, the errand boy took the prince and princess upstairs, and showed them 2 rooms where they could sleep. That very night it happened that the queen awoke, and told the king that she had a dream that the errand boy had returned, and brought back his 2 children, who had been stolen many years ago. "All that is only a dream," said the king. "Let me sleep." Soon the queen was awakened again by the same dream, and when the same thing happened for the 3rd time, they both got up and went down to the stable to look into the goat stall, and there he was in his old place. Then they went up to the errand boy's room and found him asleep on the floor, and in his bed the young prince, while in the adjoining room the princess lay sleeping. Then there was boundless joy